Hey there. Get ready to deep dive into the life of Ayyash ibn Abi Rabiah.
Ooh, this is a good one.
He was an early Muslim who faced some serious challenges and whose story is actually woven into the verses of the Quran.
Ayash's life is really a unique perspective on the early days of Islam.
Yeah, a time of immense change and upheaval.
Yeah, definitely.
And get this, his family dynamics were, well, let's just say complicated.
Oh, yeah, how so?
We're talking about someone related to both Umar ibn al-Khattab.
A prominent figure in early Islam.
Exactly. And also Abu Jahl, one of Islam's most staunch opponents at the time.
Oh, wow.
Imagine those family dinners.
It really makes you wonder how Ayash navigated those relationships, especially after he chose to convert to Islam.
Yeah, early on, too.
Right, this was a bold decision that would ultimately shape his entire life.
It definitely wasn't an easy path to escape persecution in Mecca. He even migrated to Abyssinia,
Oh, wow.
which is modern-day Ethiopia.
That's a huge leap of faith.
Huge, leaving everything behind to seek refuge in a foreign land.
It must have been incredibly difficult.
And just imagine doing that with your family, in tow.
Yeah.
Ayyash made this journey with his wife, Asma bint Salama.
Oh.
They even had a son, Abdullah, who was born in Abyssinia.
And what's remarkable is that Abdullah later became a narrator of his parents' stories,
Wow.
preserving their legacy. It adds another layer of significance to Ayash's story. It's not just personal, it becomes a part of history.
So they eventually returned to Mecca, hoping to join the Prophet Muhammad on his hijrah, the migration to Medina.
Okay.
But that's where things took a turn.
Oh, no.
As Ayyash was traveling with his cousin Umar, they were intercepted by none other than Abu Jahl and another brother.
Now remember, Abu Jahl was vehemently opposed to the spread of Islam.
Right.
He was willing to do whatever it took to stop it.
Of course.
So he concocted a rather deceptive plan to lure Ayyash back to Mecca.
Okay, let's unpack this deception because it's pretty intense.
Okay.
They told Ayyash that his mother was deathly ill and refused to eat or drink until she saw him.
Oh, wow. Talk about playing on someone's heartstrings. It was a calculated move preying on Ayash's sense of filial duty. And despite Umar's warnings that it was a trap, Ayyash felt compelled to return. I can't imagine the inner turmoil he must have felt torn between his family and his faith.
What a predicament. And sadly, as you might have guessed, Umar's suspicions were correct.
Yeah, no.
As soon as Ayyash was separated from Umar, Abu Jahl and his brother overpowered him.
They chained him up and dragged him back to Mecca, putting an end to his attempt to migrate to Medina. This marked a dark period for Ayyash.
So instead of finding safety and community in Medina, he's now trapped back in Mecca. What happened to him there?
He was subjected to severe persecution, facing immense pressure to renounce his faith. This went on for years, during which he missed pivotal events like the battles of Badr Uhud and Khandak.
Wow.
These were defining moments in the early Muslim community, and Ayyash was forced to watch from the sidelines.
I can only imagine how isolating and difficult that must have been.
Absolutely.
To be so committed to your faith, yet cut off from the very community that shares it.
And, even though Ayyash was trapped in Mecca, the Prophet Muhammad never forgot him or the other Muslims suffering there. He would regularly pray for them,
Yeah.
even asking for a drought to be inflicted upon their oppressors.
What?
This shows the significance of community and solidarity in the face of hardship. It must have been a source of comfort for Ayyash to know he wasn't forgotten.
What a powerful gesture of support.
Mm.
It speaks volumes about the Prophet's compassion and the strong bonds within the early Muslim community. But even with these prayers, Ayyash's situation in Mecca remained precarious. And then there was the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, I've heard of, that wasn't it supposed to bring peace?
It was a treaty signed between the Muslims in Medina and the Meccans. It was a complex agreement with lasting consequences. While it did establish a temporary truce, it also contained a clause that actually made things more complicated for Ayyash.
How so?
One of the stipulations was that any Meccan who had fled to Medina had to be returned to Mecca. This meant Ayyash couldn't simply escape and join the Muslim community. It was a major setback for him.
Wow, that's ironic. A treaty intended to bring peace actually hinders Ayyash's freedom. He must have felt utterly trapped. What happened next?
This is where a rather cunning figure named Abu Basir enters the picture. He was another persecuted Muslim who had escaped to Medina. However, when he was ordered to return to Mecca under the terms of the treaty, he refused.
He refused. That's pretty bold. What did he do?
He gathered a band of fighters and strategically positioned themselves outside of Medina along the trade routes that were vital to the Meccan economy.
So he's playing hardball. What was his game plan?
By disrupting these trade routes, Abu Basir and his men could apply significant economic pressure on the Meccans. It was a brilliant tactical move.
So he's basically holding the Meccan economy hostage to force their hand. Did it work?
It did. The Meccans, desperate to restore their trade and revenue, approached the prophet and requested the removal of the clause in the treaty requiring the return of those who had fled to Medina.
And that paved the way for Ayash's freedom. After years of suffering, he could finally rejoin the Muslim community. What a relief that must have been.
It was a joyous occasion for Ayyash, his wife, and the others who had been trapped in Mecca. It marked the end of their long and arduous journey to freedom. Think about it, years of uncertainty, persecution, and separation culminating in this moment of reunion. That must have felt like a miracle.
It's a truly remarkable story of resilience and the power of faith, even in the darkest of times. But as we know, Ayash's story doesn't end there.
You're right. His challenges were far from over. And what's fascinating is that his experiences, his trials, and his unwavering belief are actually reflected in the verses of the Quran itself.
Hold on, we're going to pause right there. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore those very verses and what they reveal about the spiritual significance of Ayash's journey. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Ayyash ibn Abi Rabiah. We've been exploring his remarkable journey from his conversion to Islam, his flight to Abyssinia, and his eventual escape from persecution in Mecca.
Yeah, it's an incredible story of resilience and faith.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned before, the break, Ayash's experiences are actually reflected in the verses of the Quran. That's pretty amazing. What's the connection?
Well, his story highlights the challenges and tests that early Muslims faced for their beliefs. And these tests are directly addressed in the Quran. Remember how Ayyash and others were persecuted for simply believing in one God?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine facing such opposition for your faith.
Right, and the Quran acknowledges this reality. For instance, Surah Al-Ankabut begins with this verse. Do people think that they will simply say they believe and they will not be tested?
Okay, that's a powerful statement. It suggests that true belief isn't just about words, it's about actions, about standing firm in your faith even when things get tough.
Exactly. This verse, according to some scholars, directly relates to the experiences of Ayyash and others who were persecuted in Mecca. It highlights the idea that faith isn't passive, it's something that's actively forged through trials and tribulations.
So Ayash's story becomes a powerful example of this principle. He could have easily abandoned his faith to escape the persecution, but he didn't. He held on to his beliefs even when it seemed like all hope was lost.
Absolutely. And in doing so, he embodies the essence of that verse. His unwavering commitment, despite the immense pressure and suffering, demonstrates a profound depth of belief.
It's a reminder that faith isn't just about rituals or doctrines. It's about resilience, strength, and an unwavering commitment to what you believe in, even in the face of adversity. Are there any other Quranic connections to Ayash's story?
Yes, and this next one is particularly poignant. It relates to that tragic incident during the conquest of Mecca, where Ayyash accidentally killed a fellow Muslim.
You're talking about the former torturer who had actually converted to Islam. It must have been a devastating realization for Ayyash.
It was, and this event led to the revelation of a very important verse in the Quran, that it is not for a believer to kill another believer except by mistake.
I see. So this verse is acknowledging the sanctity of life within Islam, even in the heat of battle.
Exactly. It underscores the gravity of taking a life, even unintentionally, especially the life of another believer. The accidental nature of Ayyash's action is emphasized, highlighting the importance of intention and understanding.
This verse also humanizes the companions of the Prophet, doesn't it? It shows that they were capable of making mistakes, even tragic ones.
It does. It reminds us that even those who are deeply committed to their faith are not infallible. They're human, just like us, susceptible to errors and judgment, especially in the chaos of war.
That's an important reminder for all of us. It encourages compassion and understanding, even when dealing with difficult situations. And it highlights the importance of forgiveness, both for ourselves and for others.
You've hit the nail on the head. This verse emphasizes the need for mercy and forgiveness, even in the face of such a tragic circumstance. It teaches us to look beyond the action itself and consider the intent and the context.
Now, shifting gears a bit, you mentioned earlier that Ayyash's family dynamics were quite complicated. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, you have to remember that Ayyash's half-brother through his father was Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl.
Wait a minute, are you saying that Abu Jahl's son, Ayyash's greatest adversary, eventually converted to Islam? That's quite a twist.
It is. And not only did Ikrimah convert, but he became a respected and fierce warrior for Islam.
Wow, so the son of Ayyash's persecutor became his brother-in-arms. That must have been an incredible transformation.
It truly was. It speaks volumes about the power of faith to change hearts and minds, and imagine the complexities of their relationship. These two men, once on opposite sides of a bitter conflict, now fighting side by side for the same cause, it's almost Shakespearean.
It really is. It highlights the idea that even the most entrenched divisions can be overcome. It's a testament to the unifying power of faith and shared purpose.
And think about the conversations they must have had, the experiences they shared, the forgiveness and understanding that must have transpired between them. It's a powerful reminder that reconciliation is always possible, even after the deepest of wounds.
Okay, so we've covered the Quranic connections, the complexities of Ayash's family ties, his unwavering faith, and his incredible resilience. But there's another layer to his story that we need to explore.
You're right. To fully understand Ayyash ibn Abi Rabiah, we need to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, the historical context that shaped his life and experiences.
That's for the final part of our deep dive. We'll explore how Ayash's personal journey intersects with the broader historical narrative of early Islam. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Ayyash ibn Abi Rabiah.
We've been unpacking his incredible story, from his personal struggles and family dynamics to the Quranic verses that reflect his experiences.
And now it's time to explore the historical context, to see how Ayyash's life fits into the larger narrative of early Islam. What was happening in the world that made his journey so challenging and ultimately so significant?
Well, imagine the Arabian Peninsula during that time, a period of immense change and upheaval. The emergence of Islam was disrupting the existing social and political order.
So it was more than just a new religion. It was a force for change that challenged the status quo.
Absolutely. Mecca in particular was deeply rooted in tribalism and polytheism.
Right.
The traditional power structures dominated by wealthy merchants and tribal leaders felt threatened by Islam's message of equality and monotheism.
I can see why those in power would be resistant. Islam challenged their economic and political dominance.
Exactly. And this resistance manifested in the persecution faced by early Muslims like Ayyash. Remember, he fled to Abyssinia to escape this persecution.
Of course.
It shows just how high the stakes were.
It's hard to believe that simply believing in one God could put your life in danger.
It's a testament to the unwavering faith of those early converts who held on to their beliefs despite facing such opposition. Their courage paved the way for the spread of Islam.
Speaking of which, the Hijraz, the Prophet Muhammad's migration to Medina, was a turning point, wasn't it?
It was a pivotal moment. In Medina, the Muslim community could flourish, establishing a society based on Islamic principles. It laid the foundation for what would become a rapidly expanding empire.
And if you recall, Ayyash intended to be part of that hijrah.
Right.
But he was betrayed by Abu Jahl and imprisoned in Mecca. This prevented him from being part of that crucial early period in Medina.
His absence highlights how individual stories were intertwined with the broader historical events. Ayyash's imprisonment wasn't just personal. It reflected the larger conflict between the Meccans and the growing Muslim community. He became a symbol of the persecution faced by Muslims in Mecca.
So even though he was physically separated, his story still reflects the challenges faced by the early Muslims.
Precisely. His suffering mirrored the struggles of the entire community, and his eventual escape and reunion with the Prophet in Medina symbolized the resilience and eventual triumph of Islam against all odds.
His story really does encapsulate the tumultuous nature of that era. And then there's the Battle of Yarmouk, where both Ayyash and his former enemy Ikrimah ibn Sabiyal fought together and were martyred.
The Battle of Yarmouk was a major confrontation with the Byzantine Empire, one that had significant implications for the future of the Islamic world. It solidified the Muslim conquest of the Levant, opening up new territories and paving the way for further expansion.
So Ayyash, who years earlier had been imprisoned and persecuted, found himself on the front lines of a battle that would help shape the course of history.
And the fact that he fought alongside Ikrimah Abu Jahl's son speaks volumes about the unifying power of faith. Two men who were once sworn enemies, united by their shared belief, fighting and dying together. It's a testament to the transformative impact of Islam.
It really makes you think about the complexities of history and the power of individual stories.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the grand narratives of conquests and empires, but it's stories like Ayyash's that remind us of the human cost of these events. Behind the battles and political maneuvering, there were individuals with their own hopes, fears, and beliefs.
Right. His story brings a personal dimension to history, allowing us to connect with the past on a deeper level.
That's why it's so important to delve into these individual stories. By understanding the experiences of people like Ayyash ibn Abi Rabiah, we gain a richer, more nuanced understanding of the past and the forces that have shaped our world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listener? Why should they care about Ayash's story centuries later?
I think Ayash's story is a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. It challenges us to consider what we truly believe in and how far we would go to stand up for those beliefs, even in the face of adversity. It's a story about faith perseverance and the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most challenging obstacles.
It's a message that resonates across time and cultures, reminding us that even in the darkest of times, hope and courage can prevail.
Ayyash ibn Abi Rabia may have lived centuries ago, but his story offers timeless lessons about courage, conviction, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Ayyash ibn Abi Rabiah. We hope you found it insightful and perhaps even inspiring.
Remember, history is full of these hidden gems waiting to be discovered. So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. You never know what fascinating stories you might uncover.
Until next time, happy diving.